Let me give an example. We have a school from the early 20th century in New York, and I just saw it the other day. There's an entrance here and an entrance there, and this entrance says girls, and this entrance says boys.
What's going on, everybody? Thanks for stopping by. So in this video, we're breaking down a really fascinating exchange between Neil deGrasse Tyson and the Trigonometry crew, where they're tackling one of the most divisive topics right now: gender identity, bathroom access, and whether trans women should compete in women's sports. Neil's arguing that we need to think more creatively about inclusion and fairness, while Konstantin and Francis are concerned about protecting women's spaces and opportunities. Trust me, you'll want to stick around because Neil makes some arguments that are going to make you think differently about this whole debate. Before we jump in, do me a favor and comment below with your city or country. I genuinely love seeing the community we're building here. All right, let's get into this.
So first of all, I don't know a single person, and we've talked to trans people on the show. We have trans employees at Trigonometry. We've spoken to all sorts of people about this issue. I do not know a single person who wants to prevent people from dressing how they want, or behaving how they want, or choosing any name that they want. However, the problem is...
So you don't, but you know such people are out there.
I'm sure such people exist in the same way that there are people who believe that the earth is flat and so on, but they're a tiny minority.
They exist.
It is
I don't know how tiny they are, given the dialogue today.
Fair point. However, what I would say is that the conversation in the public consciousness has become prominent not between people who want to defend the right of anyone to dress how they want and the people who want to prevent that. The reason the conversation has become an issue is that we assign and allow certain privileges to people based on their sex. If you are female, you get to go to places that only other females are in, like changing rooms and toilets and so on. If you are female, you get to compete only with people of your sex because females are at a disadvantage in physical competition to males in almost every sport. In other words, we carve out certain areas where your sex matters tremendously, even though we may respect your right everywhere else to believe that you are whatever you are, to dress however you are, etc. So your claim that today you woke up and put lipstick on and grew your hair out long and tweezed out your mustache and whatever, and therefore you are female, has an impact on other people in certain contexts in which that is a problem.
You gave only two contexts. Do you have others?
Sorry, I wasn't finished. And in those contexts, it is essential, people would argue, to protect women from unfair competition and from various risks for which female-only spaces already exist. That's why people are having this conversation. Okay. It's not out of bigotry.
Do you have more than those two examples? And I'll address each of those in turn. But do you have more than those two? Probably not. Okay. So let me address those two examples directly. I'll address them.
Sports is very important.
You said that.
Female-only spaces.
I remembered. But you don't seem to have a third example. And even if you do, we presume that would be a very distant third compared to those two cases. All right.
No, there's a third one I can give you very easily. In this country, for politics, we have female-only shortlists for positions in Parliament. Therefore,
I didn't know about that. That's interesting. Okay.
Well, that's another example. I can give you more. So, female-only shortlists, there are certain targets within corporations for diversity targets to have a certain number of women on the board. Therefore, when you make a claim that you are female, you are attempting, whether intentionally or not, to insert yourself into categories that are deliberately designed to protect women's interests. That is the concern that people have. So there's 4 examples for you there. Please address them.
Sure. So interesting about the Parliament. I have to look into that to find out what is it try to ensure the representation of women? Is that the goal?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, fine. So it's a perfectly noble cause there. So about personal changing spaces, okay? That's a solvable problem, of course. And we basically have accomplished that here in Manhattan, where I live. Practically all bathrooms are either multi-gender or solo bathrooms, so only one person at a time, or you walk into a space and there's stalls that are closed off, but then you exit the stall and you come to a communal sink, okay?
Yes.
So it's a solvable problem where everyone has a private space rather than for themselves rather than having a gender private space. Okay, it's solvable on a level. By the way, let me give an example. We have a school from the early 20th century in New York, and I just saw it the other day. There's an entrance here and an entrance there, and this entrance says girls, and this entrance says boys.
Okay, so right off the bat, Konstantin tries to frame this entire issue as if it's about protecting women's spaces. And on the surface, that sounds reasonable, right? He says, we assign and allow certain privileges to people based on their sex. If you are female, you get to go to places the only other females are in, like changing rooms and toilets. But here's what he's not saying. He's acting like these bathroom configurations are some sacred ancient tradition when they're actually pretty recent inventions that were designed around a very specific rigid binary that doesn't account for the full spectrum of human experience. And then he drops this line about your claim that today you woke up and put lipstick on and grew your hair out long and tweezed out your mustache and whatever, and therefore you are female has an impact on other people. Notice the dismissive tone? He's reducing someone's entire gender identity to like putting on makeup, as if trans people are just playing dress up. That's not what this is about, and he knows it. Trans people aren't waking up and casually deciding their gender based on what outfit they feel like wearing that day. This is about deeply felt identity that's been studied extensively. But this is where Neil just absolutely dismantles the panic. He says that's a solvable problem, of course, and we basically have accomplished that here in Manhattan where I live. Practically all bathrooms are either multi-gender or solo bathrooms. And you know what? He's right. This isn't some unsolvable crisis. Cities have already figured this out. Individual stalls with doors. Problem solved. Everyone gets privacy. But the conservative argument relies on treating this like some impossible puzzle when it's literally already been implemented in progressive areas. And then Neil drops the historical bomb that just puts everything in perspective. He talks about how we have a school from the early 20th century in New York, and there's an entrance here and an entrance there, and this entrance says girls, and this entrance says boys. You see what he's doing here? He's showing us that gender segregation has always been arbitrary and has always evolved. We look back at separate entrances for boys and girls and think that's ridiculous, and future generations will look back at our current bathroom panic the exact same way.
It's like, what the fuck? What? You separate them just to enter the school? I can look back on that and say that was ridiculous. You guys, what were you thinking? But back then, I'm sure it made complete sense that you're going to send the girls through that entrance, and there's an elementary school, and the boys through that entrance, okay? So it is possible to look back on whatever you were doing and say, my gosh, that was really short-sighted, and look at the solution that was proposed and implemented. That was a good idea. We moved on from that. Okay, so I remember boys' rooms where you come out and, you whip it out and we'd all be peeing into a trough, okay? We don't have those anymore.
We do, because we're technologically very far behind.
Yeah.
Okay, so and then we had urinals just lined up on a wall. That was a little more private. And now those urinals have little small but real dividers. So you're not like looking over. So there are solutions to the privacy problem, and we've all but solved that here. I can't speak for every state in the United States. Definitely here in New York City. The bathrooms, it's not, all right, that's that. Second, with sports, very interesting. There was a case where a woman wanted to be they wanted to disqualify her from an event. And she had very big muscles, and she had naturally high testosterone levels, okay? She was genetically female, but unusually high testosterone levels, and so that weirded everybody out. So I'm wondering whether the future of those sports is you don't contest gender with gender, you contest hormone ratios.
Well, hold on a second.
What
But
do you think of
the differences physiologically between men and women are not just hormonal. Women have a different hip angle. They have different heart capacity. They have different lung capacity. I mean, there are profound physiological differences, different bone density. We've had professional athletes on the show to talk about it.
I don't have a problem with that. So then you find ways to slice the population so that whatever the event is interestingly contested. So, for example, I wrestled in my life. I was captain of my high school wrestling team. It would be unfair for me at 190 pounds, which is what I was back then, to wrestle someone 120 pounds.
Hold on. It would actually be unfair for you to wrestle someone who is also 190 pounds but female.
Let me work my way there. Let me just work my way there, because
fine.
You are. I respect how active your brain is, but I've thought about all this, and just allow me to speak it at the rate that I do. Okay.
Go for it.
So it would be unfair. So they have in wrestling. They said, let's make weight categories.
So Neil continues, and he's like, what the fuck? What you step operate them just to enter the school? I can look back on that and say, that was ridiculous, you guys. What were you thinking? And that's the energy we need on this issue, because he's not being polite about outdated systems. He's calling out how absurd it looks in hindsight. And that's exactly what's happening with bathroom laws right now. People are going to look back and be embarrassed. Now, when they pivot to sports, Konstantin brings up the physiological differences and says the differences physiologically between men and women are not just hormonal. Women have a different hip angle, they have different heart capacity, they have different lung capacity. And okay, yes, there are physiological differences. Nobody's denying that. But here's where the conservative argument falls apart. They act like these differences mean we can only divide sports by assigned sex at birth and nothing else matters. That's lazy thinking. Neil comes back with you find ways to slice the population so that whatever the event is interestingly contested. And this is brilliant because he's pointing out that we already do this in every single sport. We don't just throw everyone together. We have weight classes, age divisions, skill levels, amateur versus professional. Sports have always required creative categorization to make competition fair and interesting. Then he makes it even more explicit when he says what the trans conversation is foisting upon us is the need to find ways to slice the athletic universe such that we still have interesting fair matches. See? He's reframing the entire conversation. Instead of saying no trans people can't compete, he's saying let's use our brains and figure out how to include people while maintaining fairness. Maybe it's about when someone transitioned, what their hormone levels are, whether they went through puberty blockers. There are multiple factors we could consider instead of just blanket bans. The wrestling example he gives is perfect because it shows how arbitrary our current divisions already are. Weight classes exist because we recognize that a 120-pound wrestler versus a 190-pound wrestler isn't fair competition. So we solved that problem creatively. We didn't ban one of them from wrestling altogether.
Okay. So we make weight categories. So I don't wrestle the 120. I wrestle a 190-pounder. So a wrestling match is not just this one person against the other person. It's 10 matches. And each one is intensely interesting because they are matched. Okay? So what the trans conversation is foisting upon us is the need to find ways to slice the athletic universe such that we still have interesting, fair matches. And is it a combination of did you go through puberty as a male and then transition? Did you have puberty blockers? What is your hormone level now if you want to compete? So it requires more creative thought. Rather than saying no to it all, let's be creative about this as we were with wrestling, as we are with practically any other sport. In rowing, there's a heavyweight rowing and there's lightweight rowing. They don't compete against each other. Somebody came up with that to resolve the problem because more than one category of person wanted to compete. So I agree with you, it's an unsolved problem, yes, but it's not unsolvable given what we know about human physiology. So why not rise to that occasion and solve it rather than take your older view of the world and force modern emergent conduct of people to fit that?
Okay, well, can we just come back to the female shortlist and other opportunities that women are afforded by virtue of being women? And them now being excluded from that because males are entering that competition.
Yeah, so a deeper problem, thank you for bringing that up. A deeper problem there is, why were women underrepresented to begin with? What kind of bias exists within Parliament or among the voters, maybe even the female voters, that prevented the representation from being there in the first place? That's a whole other social question that maybe can and should be answered at a deeper level than a quota coming in after the fact.
Oh, I'm not a fan of quotas, but if
that's
they
how
exist,
I would address that question.
Hold on a second. That's not addressing the question at all. The question is, female shortlist exists. Should biological males be allowed to enter those female shortlists? That's as simple as the question is.
Yeah, I'm saying I would ask why you have the short list in the first place. It's because there's something deeper that's wrong with society, that women are underrepresented in governance. So to say now, to protect that now and not try to get to the root of that problem, I think is the cart in front of the horse. So I would go deeper to that problem. So
but
you don't even
there are
have
women
to have that question.
whose opportunities are being curtailed today because they are being forced to compete, whether in sports or elsewhere, against people who have some kind of advantage over them.
We're in a transitional period, so we have to figure that out. But the way to figure out things that require solutions to progressive change is not to regress it to how things once were. If that were the case, I would still be drinking from a segregated water fountain. Okay? Oh, let's merge the water fountains and let's create the opportunities from below so that we don't even need the short list. Okay? That's how I would approach this. So yeah, we're in the middle of solving that problem now. Let's figure it out together.
I think a lot of people would have an issue with what you're saying, Neil, is because they see women being denied opportunities. They see an unfair playing field, metaphorically and literally speaking.
So fix the playing field, damn it. What? Don't say it's an unfair playing field, so all of a sudden the big issue is trans women taking the slot of a woman in an unfair playing field. Fix the playing field. And you know something? The day you fix that playing field, this conversation will look completely ridiculous. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
So Neil's laying out the wrestling analogy, and then he says, let's be creative about this, as we were with wrestling, as we are with practically any other sport. And that's the core message here. This isn't about lowering standards or being unfair to women. It's about using the same problem solving we've always used in athletics. Rowing has heavyweight and lightweight divisions. Boxing has weight classes. We figured this out before, we can figure it out again. But then when they circle back to the political representation question, Neil goes even deeper and asks, why were women underrepresented to begin with? What kind of bias exists within Parliament or among the voters? And this is what separates progressive thinking from conservative band-aid solutions. He's saying don't just create a quota system and call it a day. Ask why the inequality existed in the first place. What structural barriers prevented women from getting elected? What biases in the electorate or the party system created this gap? Because if you don't address the root cause, you're just treating symptoms. It's like if you have a leaky pipe and instead of fixing the pipe, you just keep mopping up the water. The quota system is the mop. It might clean up some of the immediate mess, but it doesn't fix why women weren't being elected to begin with. And if trans women are now entering these quota spaces, maybe that's revealing that the quota itself was never the real solution. Maybe the real solution is dismantling whatever systemic sexism prevented women from being elected on equal footing from the start. And then Neil drops the historical parallel that just ends the conversation. He says if that were the case, I would still be drinking from a segregated water fountain. He's putting the anti-trans position on the same side of history as segregationists. And you know what? He's not wrong. Every single time in history that we've fought about who gets access to what spaces, whether it was water fountains, schools, buses, bathrooms, the people arguing for segregation always thought they had good reasons. They always claimed they were protecting someone, and they were always on the wrong side of history. The final moment where Neil says, fix the playing field, damn it, don't say it's an unclear playing field. So all of a sudden the big issue is trans women taking the slot of a woman in an unfair playing field, fix the playing field. That's the mic drop. And he's exposing the scapegoating that's happening. Women face systemic inequality in the workplace, in politics, in sports, in healthcare. And instead of addressing those massive structural problems, some people would rather blame trans women for taking opportunities. It's misdirection. It's manufactured outrage to avoid doing the hard work of actually creating gender equality. And his prediction that the day you fix that playing field, this conversation will look completely ridiculous, he's absolutely right. Because once we actually achieve real gender equality, once we dismantle the patriarchal systems that disadvantage all women, including trans women, this entire debate will seem as silly as arguing about separate school entrances for boys and girls. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.